darkness. You're the only right among the wrong. You're the only hope among the chaos. You are the voice that calls me on, louder than every lie, my sword in every fight. The truth will chase away the night. Your name is power over darkness, freedom for the captives, mercy for the broken and the hopeless. Your name is faithful in the battle, glory in the struggle, mighty, won't let us down or fail us. Your name is power. Your name is power. I know that it's written, hope is certain. I know that the word will never fail. I know that in every situation you speak the power to prevail, louder than every lie, my sword in every fight. The truth will chase away the night. Your name is power over darkness, freedom for the captives, mercy for the broken and the hopeless. Your name is faithful in the battle, glory in the struggle, mighty, won't let us down or fail us. Your name is power. Your name is power. When you speak, you scatter darkness, light arise and heaven opens. Holy Spirit, let us hear it. When you speak, your church awakens. We believe that change is coming. Holy Spirit, let us see it. 'Cause when you speak, you scatter darkness, light arise and heaven opens. Holy Spirit, let us hear it. 'Cause when you speak, the church awakens. We believe that change is coming. Holy Spirit, let us see it. Your name is power over darkness, freedom for the captives, mercy for the broken and the hopeless. Your name is faith in the battle, glory in the struggle, mighty, won't let us down or fail us. Your name is power over darkness, freedom for the captives, mercy for the broken and the hopeless. Your name is faithful in the battle, glory in the struggle, mighty, won't let us down or fail us. Your name is power, Jesus. Your name is power. Your name is power. Your name is power.
Who is the most famous person that you have ever met? Take a moment, think about it, maybe drop a comment below. Who's the most famous person that you have ever met? Have you ever wanted to be famous? I'm sure most of us have. What did you want to be famous for? Were you going to be a sports star? Were you going to be just super rich? Be part of the, rich and famous? Maybe a politician? Maybe a hero? Maybe a villain? What did you want to be famous for? We are looking at the wise men in this series called Star Chasers, finding our identity in the pursuit of Jesus. And these are, of course, the famous guys from the Christmas story, right? They've got songs written about them. Maybe you know a few. They are some of what appear to be some of the, central figures in the Christmas story. The Christmas story doesn't have a lot of characters in it, and these guys are certainly some of the most famous from the story. So, my name is Pastor Dave. Thank you for joining us. Let's dive in. Now, as we look at the Christmas story from the perspective of the Star Chasers, of the wise men, we have to ask ourselves, why did the wise men come? Why did the wise men travel from the east and interject themselves into the Christmas story? Were they seeking to be famous? They wanted a piece of that Christmas story action. They wanted songs written about them. They wanted to have their figurines right there in everybody's nativity scene at home. Well, let's look. Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, and then later on I'm going to read more of the story, but let's start with those two verses. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." So why did the wise men come? Well, they tell us themselves why they came. They say they came because they wanted to worship Jesus, the newborn King. See, the Star Chasers weren't content to worship from a distance. They didn't want to worship Jesus just from their own couch in their own land. They wanted to be right there. They wanted to see him. They wanted to be face to face. They weren't content to worship from a distance. All right, let's read the rest. Matthew 2, 3 through 12. King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this. And what did he just heard? That the Star Chasers, the wise men, were there looking for Jesus, that he was the newborn king, and they wanted to worship him. So King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" "In Bethlehem in Judea," they said, "for this is what the prophet wrote. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah. For a ruler will come from you, who will be the shepherd for my people Israel." Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared. Then he told them, "Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child, and when you find him, come back and tell me too, so that I can go and worship him too." After this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. They opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. When it was time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod. All right, so let's look at the story. First, who are the characters? Right? Who are the characters in this section of the Christmas story? Well, obviously, Jesus is a character, but he doesn't have any speaking lines, and he's still a baby, so he's You could say he's a small character, but in the context of what I'm asking, he's a small character in this portion of the story. He is the central figure, right? But he's got a very small part. Who are the characters then? Mary and Joseph, right? And specifically Mary is mentioned in this section. I'm just looking at this section that I read. King Herod. King Herod is one of the characters, and the people in Jerusalem, and of course the religious teachers and the wise men. Those seem to be the characters. Jesus, Mary, Herod, the people, religious teachers, these are the characters. So, what is the crux of what is going on here? Right, so you have the star chasers, you have the wise men who are seeking out Jesus because they said they came to worship him. He's the newborn king. The star has led them. They have chased the star from eastern lands, and they have come to worship. But when they arrive on the scene, they go and they start asking, where is, I think when they came, they assumed that, man, we're guys, we're wise men. I mean, they seem to be learned men, in some traditions and songs that we call them magi, so they may have had king status themselves. They seem to be people of some means based on the gifts they brought. They understand some of what's going on, but they don't understand everything. And they assumed that, I mean, we're from the east. We're from hundreds of miles away, and we're not part of the religious center that you guys are a part of, like right here in Jerusalem, where because Bethlehem is just a few miles from Jerusalem, and so Bethlehem, Jerusalem, that area, that is the epicenter of the Jewish religion. It is the epicenter of the Messiah, right? And so when they come from the east, they assume that the whole town is going to be abuzz about this newborn king. Like, they assume that there is going to be all this fanfare, right? Like, come on, God, the Messiah has been born, and you guys are of the people who the Messiah said he would come to. You've got the prophecies, you've got all of the scriptures talking about it. You guys should have, your hand right on the pulse of this. Where is he? They assume that everybody is paying attention, that everybody's excited about this, and they get there, and concerning the Messiah, it's a bit of a ghost town. People are like, what? Baby was born? Tell us more. They don't seem to know what is. Now, they understand the story. And so when they first ask, Herod doesn't, he doesn't know where Jesus is. He's still kind of unraveling what's going on. And so he tells the wise men, you guys go find him and then come back and let me know, because I want to worship him too. And so then he calls in the religious leaders, and they tell him the prophecies. They tell him the background. This is what God said he would do. And so the people kind of know, but they weren't paying attention. And so at the crux of what is going on is this idea that the wise men have just kind of kicked the door in on this plot. All of a sudden, Herod's like, wait a second, there's somebody else trying to get to my throne. And the religious leaders are like, wait a second, there's somebody here that's going to, take our power. Wait a second, there's somebody who's going to be a threat to us. And so at the crux of what's going on in this part of the Christmas story is jealousy and fear and suspicion and deceit and a murder plot. This has got the makings of one of those great Christmas stories, one of those great Christmas movies that everybody debates whether it's a Christmas movie. Is it a Christmas movie because it's about Christmas, or because it was released during Christmas time, or that it's Christmas time during the plot of the movie, but it doesn't really revolve around Christmas, right? So like, is Gremlins a Christmas movie? Because Christmas happens in the movie, is it a Christmas movie? There's always these debates, like with that movie Die Hard, is it a Christmas movie? Well, in the actual Christmas story, what you have going on in this section with the wise men is it's a story about jealousy, fear, suspicion, deceit, murder plots. Like, that's central to what's going on in the Christmas story. That's why you could argue that a movie like Gremlins is a Christmas movie, right? So, why is all that stuff happening? Why is there jealousy, fear, suspicion, deceit, murder plots? Well, it's because Jesus came to disrupt the balance of power. And I think the Jewish leaders knew that from their religious background. Like, they understood what the Messiah, on some level, they understood what the Messiah would do to their institution of power. King Herod didn't understand, but he was still threatened because he's like, wait a second, somebody else calling themselves king? Like, I am the king. So Jesus came to disrupt the balance of power. And the wise men, they were just willingly there for it. Like, they were coming to worship Jesus because they were saying, you know what? We need the balance of power in our own hearts to be disrupted. And we're willing to give Jesus the praise he is due. We're willing to give up our place on the throne of our own heart and place Jesus on the throne. We're willing to have that power disrupted in our own lives. So the wise men were just there for it. They came to worship. The rest of the characters, excluding Mary, of course, in the story, the rest of the characters, they weren't so sure. There is a Christmas song that you've probably heard of. It's sung by Carrie Underwood, and she mostly, from my understanding, sings like country music, and I am anti-country music. Like, I love music excluding country music. Like, I don't even consider it music. It's an annoyance. I'm just not a fan of country music. You can hate me if you want. I'm just not a fan of country music. I'm a fan of kind of the outlaw spirit of it, but I think the outlaw spirit, they should just make rock and roll instead. So, but anyway, Carrie Underwood, she has this famous Christmas song, Jesus Take the Wheel. And right, you're like, wait a second, that's not a Christmas song, is it? What's like Gremlins is a Christmas movie? Jesus Take the Wheel is a Christmas song. Right? If you read the lyrics, and I read the lyrics, I have them on my iPad right here. I'm not going to play the song because I hate country music, but in the lyrics, it's a Christmas song. It's a story of a journey of this mother going to, I'll just read it. She was driving last Friday on her way to Cincinnati on a snow white Christmas Eve. Like, right away, here's the plot of the song. It's about Christmas. Going home to see her mama and her daddy with the baby in the back seat. 50 miles to go, and she was running low on faith and gasoline. It had been a long, hard year. And that's where you get, like, this is a country song because it's all of the hard luck they go through, right? I don't know what it is with country musicians and always having bad luck. They're like a magnet for it. But what happens is she hits this patch of ice on the road, and then she has to confront the fear as she skids around on the road, and she has to confront the fear of some of the decisions she's made and where she's at in life, and the fact that she's recognizing that she's doing that she needs to give up control of her life, right? That she saw both their lives flash before her eyes. She didn't even have time to cry. She was so scared, she threw up her hands in the air. Jesus, take the wheel. Take it from my hands, because I can't do this on my own. I'm letting go. So give me one more chance and save me from this road I'm on. Jesus, take the wheel. And it goes on. But I want to tell you that when Jesus came, when he arrived that first Christmas, he didn't come to just take the wheel. He came to take the keys. He came to take the car. He came to take the road. Like, he is coming for more than just the wheel. And I'm not, poking a hole in Carrie Underwood's song here, outside of the fact that it's country music, right? But the actual premise of the song, like giving Jesus control, that's a good thing. I'm just saying that the song, it doesn't go far enough for what Jesus came to do. He came to take more than just the wheel when your life gets out of control. See, we tend to have this propensity to have Jesus be our plan B. He is the backup plan. And I want to tell you, Jesus is a terrible plan B. Jesus is a terrible plan B because Jesus is not content to be your plan B. He is your plan A or nothing. That's it. He is the starter. He will not ride the bench. He's you can't have Jesus be your plan B and expect to have a relationship with him and for that relationship to function how God intended. He's plan A or not part of your plan. There is no Jesus on the bench of my team. There is no Jesus in the back seat and I'll give him the wheel when I hit the icy spot. That's a terrible way to live. See, Jesus came to disrupt the balance of power. He came to take the throne. And that is why Herod felt threatened. That is why the religious leaders felt threatened. Because it's almost as if somewhere in their subconscious or somewhere they understood the shift that was happening. Meanwhile, the wise men, they came to willingly give Jesus the keys, the wheel, the car, the road. They came so that they could say, Jesus, you need to be our plan A, and we want to come tell you in person. And it's reflective in the fact that they didn't come to seek fame, they came to worship. Right? There is this adverse correlation or this inverse correlation between the desire to be famous and the eagerness to worship, right? The people who want to be famous, they don't want to be giving fame away. They want to be attracting fame to themselves. They don't want to give worship. They want to be worshiped. And we live in this culture now where there is this creeping danger of, a lot of it is social media and the advent of YouTube and all of the online stuff, where it has allowed people to seek fame. And that's what a lot of people do on these platforms, right? Like, do you post a TikTok so that 2 people watch it, or do you want 2 million to watch it? Everybody wants their moment. Everybody wants their viral video. Everybody wants that little slice of fame. And the problem with that is that when we are seeking fame, it's hard for us to give worship. Because what is at the heart of fame? It's a look at me attitude. And what's at the heart of worship? It's the humble, I give everything to you, you're worthy of everything, Jesus. They're opposites. Seeking fame and giving worship are opposites. See, fame isn't sinful in and of itself. Sometimes people become famous because of a selfless act. Sometimes people become famous just because of the position God places them in life. But fame does build a bridge that makes it pretty easy to walk into sinfulness. The wise men didn't let their positions of power, didn't let their influence or their money overshadow the worship that they knew Jesus deserved and that they came to give to Jesus. See, when Jesus came, some were threatened and some were thrilled. And as we look at the story, And as you look at the interaction between Herod and the religious leaders and the wise men and how that all unfolds, you can see that in the Christmas story, some were threatened and some were thrilled. And I think when we look at the Christmas story, we have to ask ourselves that question. Do I feel threatened by Jesus coming, or am I thrilled? And at first we want to say, oh, I'm thrilled. Like, he came to bring all this stuff. He came to bring joy and peace and forgiveness and all this sort of stuff. But when we live our life, when the rubber meets the road, oftentimes we live as if we are threatened by Jesus' arrival than as if we are thrilled. Because if we were thrilled, we would be willingly surrendering our heart to follow Jesus, to worship Jesus. But oftentimes we spend a good portion of our life running from Jesus. We treat him like a threat. We're not thrilled he came. And we got to be honest about that. We would rather have control of our own lives than giving Jesus the key and the wheel. Right? Who sits on the throne of your heart? Who sits on the throne of your heart? See, the wise men, these star chasers, they traveled so that they could worship Jesus face to face. They traveled so that they could look at Jesus and say, Jesus, here's the throne of my heart. Come take your rightful spot. Revelation 5:13 says, and then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea, they sang, blessing and honor and glory and power belong to the one sitting on the throne and to the Lamb forever and ever. And it's a declaration of what will happen. At some point, Jesus will get the worship he deserves right now. At some point, the balance of power will be completely disrupted. At some point, he will get the praise. The question is, will you give it to him today or not? Who sits on the throne of your heart? I'm not famous. I don't know what I would do if I became famous. It would depend on why I became famous, right? Like if I became famous for a heroic act, or if I became famous because I became a supervillain, it would change the story a bit. I don't know what I would do with fame. I don't really want it. I like my privacy. People know me as a nice guy, I think. They know me as a good worker. They know me as a Christian. They know me as a pastor. But above all of that, I want people to know me as a Jesus worshiper. I think we have made the wise men famous for the gifts they gave. It's not wrong to do that. We've made them famous for having followed the star. Again, that's part of the story. I'm not nitpicking at that. But I think that the thing that should make them most famous is the fact that they came to worship. They didn't seek fame. They didn't come to Jesus for answers. They didn't come to hear a great moral teacher. They didn't come for wisdom. They didn't come for relief. They didn't come for peace. They came to Jesus because they wanted to worship him face to face. How far will you go to worship Jesus face to face? They traveled from the east. How far will you go to worship Jesus face to face? As we close, I have 2 action steps. These are simple in concept, but difficult to implement. Number 1, surrender. Like Carrie Underwood sang about, surrender. Give Jesus the wheel. And go beyond that though. The keys, the car, the road, all of it. Surrender. Look at your life, analyze your heart. What are the areas in your life that you are holding too tight onto? And how can you surrender those to Jesus? The second action step, worship in person. And I'm not making a distinction between online or in-person services. I'm saying worship Jesus in person. I'm saying learn to worship Jesus face to face. Set aside the time, prepare your heart. I think in the context of church in person in the community, I think that's helpful. But worship Jesus face to face. It's not just singing a song. It's deeper. And the reason it is the second action step and not the first is because you need the first to accomplish the second. As we surrender, as we rightly place Jesus on the throne of our heart, we can worship him face to face. So those are your two action steps. Have a blessed week.